Hey there, fellow creators, Ben here from Cinder Studios, and I'm back this week for another quick art project that anyone can do. Stick around. So it's been a while since the last one of these. It took me some time to come up with something that I think is worth doing and is also relatively short in terms of how long it takes to do it. If you missed the last time around, we made this painted jar. It works really well for just a utility jar. You can also use it as a candle holder, put a light inside of it, and it glows and radiates out. We are sticking today with the more cylindrical objects and doing a custom paint job and a thermal mug. So a lot of times you'll end up getting sort of a cup like this. This one came from a local gas station convenience store chain. But your plastic bottles that often are given out through, company promotions. Here, take this thing with our logo on it. And while that's nice, it could be a really nice quality bottle or cup or something. It's like, well, it's got the, that company logo on it. It might be a company I don't work for anymore. It might be I was at this event and it was their promotional thing. So I'm going to show you how to take a container of that sorts, give it a quick rub down with sandpaper and stuff like that to prime it and let you paint it yourself. So this, again, is just sort of a simple little thermal mug. It's a 20-ounce cup. It's got a really nice sort of rubbery grip at the bottom, simple plastic lid, but it's also just a nice thermal mug. Despite you can recycle it, it's made to be disposed of, at least to some degree. But I was like, man, this is just a nice cup, and I really wish there was a better design on this. Now, this isn't to say that you can only do this with something a little bit more disposable. If you have any kind of bottle whatsoever, especially if it's plastic, something like this, for example, really easy to do, to just kind of re-prep it and rework it. If you've got a stainless steel bottle, this works really well as well. You probably don't necessarily need to do the sanding stage for that one. But yeah, if you want to custom paint a bottle, this is a really easy method for doing it. So the first step in prepping any kind of project you're working on is to sand and prime. Again, if you're using a stainless steel bottle, you don't have to sand it. You still can, but it might run into a little bit of a difficulty being able to do that. Make sure the bottle's clean, remove any pieces you're not going to paint, and give it a light sanding. I'm using just some 100 grit sandpaper here. Forgot to hit record a second ago, so I've already made 2 passes around this thing, one vertical, one horizontal, just to give myself a little bit of a scratchy tooth for any kind of paint layer to stick to. Granted, a lot of the design came off because it's just a fairly cheap painted design, or labeled paint design, whatever the hell this is. But all of that just is to give it a little bit of a extra texture and grip for that paint layer. Second part of this is to tape off any edges you don't want to have paint on them with. Now, obviously, if you're not worried about, again, like this, rubber grip down here, this extra plastic edge, if it's just a full bottle design, you can go ahead and just not tape anything off, at least with the exception of maybe the cap, and just spray paint it. It works just as well. I'm going to go ahead and take this off and use a little bit of black gesso for my sort of blocking out for this. So, just bear in mind for whatever your particular project requires, you may or may not need to tape anything off. Now, you might wonder why you would want to tape anything off at all. Like, why not just paint everything from the cap to this to whatever? You have to remember, especially if you're selling a travel mug like this, is that you have to think about food safety. If you're doing anything with artist-grade paint or pigments, or even spray paint, all of that's going to be a contributing factor, and you don't want to make it unsafe for yourself or anybody else to consume anything out of the cup itself. Now, once again, I am choosing to use some black gesso for my particular project. Black gesso, otherwise black cup. You don't necessarily have to use black gesso. You can just use regular white gesso. You can use a tint. I am choosing to use black in this instance, specifically because the design that I have in my head for this, the black gesso is just going to make everything a lot easier. So nothing fancy here, just, again, simple brush application, and because we sanded the surface, it's going to really allow that gesso to soak in and sit and grab that container a lot more. If you're using a glass bottle, you can check out my tips from the salsa jar project that we did last time. For that, I utilize a bit of a golden medium called JC200, I believe, which helps you be able to paint on a non-porous surface such as glass. But because this is a plastic bottle or cup or whatever this thing is, we can very easily just sand that down. If you were to not sand a bottle, specifically plastic, you might think, well, if I'm using acrylics are plastic, the plastic bottle is plastic. Yes, but you do run into the problem of that paint peeling and chipping off down the road, especially for something like a travel mug like this. You're going to be handling it often, and you want to be sure that that paint has something to stick to beyond just the smooth plastic itself. So that's why we sand it, not just to help the paint stick initially, but also to compensate for the fact that you're going to be picking it up quite often. Okay, so with the gesso layer dry, we can start thinking about design and which paints to grab. Now, for this, I thought it'd be really fun to do sort of a space nebula that just kind of wraps around the whole thing and changes a little here and there. Relatively abstract-ish design, and it's relatively easy to do and super, super fun. The general example for this you can find in 2 different videos of mine, Dry Brushing Part 2, as well as, I believe it's Part 2 of the How to Paint Space Stuff series. Links will be in the description box for those, as well as in a couple of cards you're probably already seeing. Now, once again, thinking about food safety here, I specifically did not want to use any of like cadmium or cobalt-based colors. Again, you're going to be picking up a lot. We are going to clear coat it when we're done, of course, probably multiple times, again, for food safety reasons. But I really was just for extra layer of precautions, want to avoid a lot of the heavier metal pigments. So for this, I've grabbed some quinacridone magenta, a little iso-indolone yellow, and some benzimidazolone yellow light. In theory, you could probably use a much cheaper paint than I'm using here. But just really, and probably grab something even more student grade, or even a craft paint would probably work really well for this, specifically if you're going for something that's non-toxic, and if you're going to be really paranoid about that. But I'm just going to stay into the synthetic colors a little bit for this, rather than hating myself by using paints that I don't like, and that I find personally are a lot harder to use. So I'm using my regular professional acrylics, but again, use what you feel is necessary for your particular project. So while you can probably apply this with a brush, and in terms of making something that looks a little cleaner on the design, you probably should, but I'm actually just going to be using a little bit of a rag to apply this paint. This is mostly just to kind of help me stay around that curve and around that visualization that I need here. It's not required that you use the rag. Again, use a brush, use whatever you have lying around. But I think in this particular instance, the rag is going to create a much more interesting and dynamic look to the piece. So I'm just going to wrap just one finger around through that cloth, and little by little, just grab a bit of this paint and just start kind of buffing it around on the cup. What's nice is specifically about like the Quin Magenta in this case, this is actually a rather expensive color of paint to be doing on a kind of throwaway project like this. But it's a very transparent, reddish purple color. And because we use the black gesso as our base, what this color is going to do is pick up a lot on those dark undertones and allow us to build that color up slower than we might otherwise do, painting on a brighter, whiter base. So I'm just kind of swirl this around a little bit. If you paint clouds at all, this is a fairly similar concept, just making little swirls and things like that. And you want to work dark to light, specifically if you're doing a nebula. Again, I have 2 different tutorials on creating nebulas, one for dry brushing, the other just as a general of here's how to paint space objects. So if you're wanting to do something like this on canvas, I do already have videos showing you how to do that way. It's also why I wanted to pick this design for this project, is because, again, I already have fairly extensive tutorials on this, and this is, I can kind of breeze through a little easier. So if you guys want that longer, 30, 40-minute breakdown of this technique, you can certainly go check that out on the channel, at the end of this video. So like anything else, make some swirls, pick it up and look at it a little bit, make sure you're liking how things are progressing with the design. And we're going to slowly work our way warmer. My initial thought to this was to use a blue or a green, but like my blues and greens again are like it's the cobalts, it's the phthalos, and I'm really trying to focus in on keeping that food safety aspect in line with this being a travel mug in this instance. Again, keeping mostly just dabs of paint as I need them, just little circles with my finger and a rag here. Such is the case with all these fun, quick, easy art projects. I want to be sure that I'm allowing you guys to say, hey, look, anyone can do these. You don't need a fancy brush. I'm technically using some fancy paint for this, but black primer coat, sandpaper, a rag. So far, with the exception of me using the nicer paint, this is a very simple, straightforward little project. And because I'm working in thin, rag-applied, relatively dry layers here, and using acrylics in this way, you can just kind of keep making more and more passes, and it's going to dry as you go. I feel like there's going to be a tendency you want to grab right here, but again, taped off these edges for a reason. Hold on to your project in a place that you're not going to get paint all over your hands, with the exception of probably what's bleeding through this rag right now. All right, that feels pretty good for my first pass. I need just a hint more of this magenta on my palette. I'm going to start threading in a little bit of the that yellowish gold color to start mixing in to that, and sort of coming in the center of that design. I don't want to completely trace over everything. I want to give the idea that there's sort of this inner working layer of these colors, and they're sort of almost like think about painting a flame, so to speak. You have this just inner core that's a lot brighter than the outer sections. And because it's a nebula, it doesn't have to be perfect. You can have a bigger swath of color somewhere. I can even do that and have it like that much brighter section, and it won't really look out of place. That's what's really fun about doing space stuff. There's a lot of leeway in being able to make those shapes and blend them out accordingly. You might say, well, man, I don't have a big fancy brush, or I don't have this big fancy paint. Again, you can do this with just about any paint you can imagine, and I'm sitting here with a rag, so it's not something that you should feel is a barrier to entry. And that's why I love doing these quick little art projects, is because you can just kind of make stuff up. Get a new section of this rag. We're just going to go straight into that yellow now, which I'm kind of already doing a little bit, but not totally. Kind of wiping a little bit more now with it, trying to get some other streaks and things in. Gotta hold that up and look at it in a second. Yeah, I'm gonna need a little bit more of that red around those edges, but that looks okay. Just adding a little bit of this brighter yellow, not a ton, very sparingly here. And I want to get a new area to wipe with. Some of the orange, but mostly just that brighter yellow. Now I can just kind of really thread in those brighter sections. Lightly. Now I am going to grab a little titanium white. Technically, titanium white is a metal pigment, but at least in this day and age, it is the safest white that we've got. So I'm just grab a little bit of that. Just kind of in the center a little of each of those, just little swirls. Just dotting some of that in. Very sparingly. All right, I want to do another pass of this red. I need to spread that out just a little bit more on the edges of that design. Nothing crazy, but just a little. All right, now I do want to work some dark spots into this, at least to some degree. I'm actually going to mix this smalt hue. It's my secret weapon for darks and shadows. It's a mixture of a phthalo, a violet, and a black. I think all of which are fairly neutral and inert. This is just to add a couple of little dark spots into the composition as a whole. You could probably just mix like some ultramarine and like a carbon black together, and you'd get a nice, safe, neutral dark as well. Yeah, I just want to work that in, especially up around the edges where I have that violet sort of fading out. And this will take on most of the color of the black without making things look too blue. I need a lot more of that color. That disappears quick. Adding a blue or a violet to the darker sections of your space over like a black gesso surface like this as well is going to really add that rich depth of color that you would expect out of, you know, looking up into the night sky. You know, just leaving that black often doesn't get you the same color depth you tend to need, especially for a space-themed piece. I feel pretty good about that. It's not absolutely perfect, but again, we're talking quick art projects, not spend all day on them art projects. Okay, time for everyone's favorite part of any given space art piece, and that is the stars. We're not doing anything too fancy today. You just thin out some white paint, grab yourself a nice stiff brush and give it a flick. You can do this super easily as well with an old toothbrush. A lot of artists love using old toothbrushes because you get a nice wide spray and variety here. I like using just a regular stiff brush. I have a little bit more control over the whole thing, especially when it comes to placement. So, let me see where I want to flick a few of these in. Definitely over the darker areas for sure. Do some little concentrated bursts in the middle somewhere. Give yourself some different ways to vary that shape a bit. If you made any mistakes, any areas you don't necessarily like, put an extra cluster of stars right on top of it. That looks pretty good to me. You don't want to go overkill with anything. It's really easy to get carried away, especially when you're having fun flicking some stars onto a piece. Try not to be too uniform with it. And there we have a nice little custom painted section of stars. I'm going to give this a couple of seconds to dry here. Definitely doesn't need a ton of time. By the time I clean my brush, it actually should be done. So with our design all finished, I'm going to go ahead and give this about 2 or 3 layers of this gloss Krylon clear coat. Again, this is just mostly to protect the surface, also to give yourself a barrier. You're going to be touching it a lot, you're going to be picking it up, you're probably not going to be holding it from the bottom super often, so you want to be sure it holds up to the general wear and tear that you might give to it otherwise. Probably should have mentioned this earlier. I don't know if this was dishwasher safe to start with, but if you're adding a layer of acrylic paint to anything, it definitely isn't anymore. Hand wash only. Okay, back from the garage, and we are fully clear coated and ready to go. So at this point, pretty simple. Just take the tape off and enjoy your hard work. So once again, this is a pretty quick, simple, easy little project. And definitely one that I think a lot of you guys are probably going to be inspired to try yourself, especially for all of these random branded bottles that everyone seems to pick up after a while. It's like, oh man, this giveaway. No, it was like my work anniversary and they gave me a free, koozie and a bottle or something. Koozie, what is this, 1995? But the process is pretty simple and straightforward, of course. Like anything else, prep your surface, tape off your edges, and you can find that you can make yourself some pretty cool stuff if you just employ a little bit of artistic creativity to things. So again, this was just a stupid little cup from the gas station. Had somebody's coffee in it at some point. I think my dad left this here. That's how I ended up getting a hold of this. But that is a much cooler and interesting design for this cup. And if you were to take this out in public, I can guarantee you someone's going to look at this and be like, where did you get that? It's like, well, I made it. It's just a random cup, off the shelf, something like that. At the very least, go go to Walmart, pick yourself up something like this. But this is a lot more interesting of a thing to have around your, home, space, life, what have you. And I can guarantee it's going to turn some heads and keep you inspired working forward in your life, your studio, and whatever you do. Sometimes it's nice to just have a little custom painted thing floating around your house, or work, or school, or wherever you go. So I hope you guys enjoyed this quick little art project for this week. If you guys want to see me do more of these fun, quick, easy art projects that anyone can do, let me know your thoughts and comments below on that. I've been struggling to come up with ones that I can do over the course of like an hour to maybe an hour and a half. But I feel like this is one of these good ones, and definitely something that anyone can do at any skill level. Again, don't even really need a brush for this one. A little bit of paint on a rag in your finger, make some swirls. Toothbrush for the stars if old toothbrush, don't use the one you currently use, obviously. But yeah, sand it down, paint it, make something new out of just an old random branded cup from the gas station. Like, well, this is boring. Nah, bring a little creativity in your life with it. That's going to do it for this week, though. Thanks, you guys, for watching. If you enjoyed this, as always, go ahead and hit the like button. I already mentioned comments of things you're interested in the comments below. I could have said that better. Thanks, guys, for watching. Keep on creating, and I will see you guys next time.